Afternoon. We'll get started here in just a moment as we allow participants to come into the waiting room. Welcome. I'm going to wait just another minute more and then we'll get started. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, What Can a Teacher or Registered Apprenticeship Mentors Learn from Other Occupations? My name is Carla Warren. I'm a senior partner with the National Center for Grow Your Own. We appreciate you spending an hour with us today. I want to share just a little bit about who we are in case this is your first introduction to the National Center for Grow Your Own. Our vision is to create a world where you can become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that supports states and districts across the nation, those states and districts who are interested in launching or expanding registered apprenticeships in teaching or grow your own pathways. We have a state network. As you can see, we support almost every state and territory in the nation and have opportunities to learn from other state partners as we continue to grow this work. If we think about where registered apprenticeships started in our country in teaching in 2021, we started with the first state in Tennessee, and that has now grown to almost every state in the nation hosting a registered apprenticeship in teaching. So thank you for being here today, and I want to share a little bit with you about the purpose of today's session. Teacher registered apprenticeship programs depend heavily on strong mentor teachers. In many other apprenticeship occupations, the journey worker mentor role has been refined over decades and decades of registered apprenticeships in the trades and other occupations. So today's conversation is going to explore what can education learn from those models, from those other occupations, and how can states strengthen their systems, their mentor systems with teacher apprenticeships. So we hope by the end of the hour today, you'll understand the role that mentor teachers play in a high quality teacher apprenticeship program, that you'll learn from other apprenticeship occupations how they structure the journey worker mentorship, and identify those practices that can strengthen the teacher apprenticeship systems in your states. We will take questions and answers or questions through the question feature. Please feel free to add those questions as we move through the session, and we'll try to answer those asynchronously. And if we have time at the end, we will also take some questions from the question chat. So please add those as they come to mind. And so at this time, I would invite our panelists to come on camera and introduce themselves. We have some esteemed experts from across the nation, and I'd love for you to take a moment and introduce yourself. Tell us a snapshot of your current role and the apprenticeship work that you are leading. So I'm going to start with Joanne from Arizona.
Good morning, good afternoon, I guess, technically. Um, I'm the State Apprenticeship Program Director for the state of Arizona, and I have the honor and privilege of supporting a team that continues to grow registered apprenticeships throughout the state. Our registered apprenticeship program has been alive and steadily growing in Arizona since 1941. Just a disclaimer, I wasn't there when it actually happened, but to date, and I'm glad to say I'm part of it, to date we have over 9,000 active apprentices across 300 programs in 13 different industries. We have close to 1,200 employers that are participating and providing employment opportunities through registered apprenticeship. And for our purposes, our current teacher registered apprenticeship program is done in partnership with our Arizona Department of Education, who is the main sponsor for this occupation in our state. It started in early 2024 and has since placed over 40 apprentices within school districts and charters throughout our state.
Thank you, Joanne. Meredith?
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Meredith Smith. I am the director of the Alabama Office of Apprenticeship. We do not have quite as large a program as Joanne does there in Arizona, but we've been a state apprenticeship agency since March of 2020, so we're a bit of a newer office. We have about 4,000 apprentices here and a little over 200 programs. The majority of our apprenticeships here in Alabama are in manufacturing and construction, but we do have a robust apprenticeship for early childhood educators that is run by our Alabama Department of Early Childhood Education. And then our K-12 teacher apprenticeship, we are about to finish our very first cohort of those. Here in Alabama, those are sponsored by the universities where the apprentices go for their related instruction. We have 2 universities participating in that. And we're currently figuring out what version 2.0 is going to look like, ready to launch our next cohort of K-12 apprentices this fall. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. David?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Polk. I have the pleasure of leading the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development's Bureau of Apprenticeship Standards. So apprenticeship director for the great state of Wisconsin. I'm going to take the moniker of the Rose Bowl and call Wisconsin the granddaddy of them all. We are the first SAA in the nation with our legislation starting in 1911. We since then we've grown and like Joanne, I was not there in 1911 when we passed our legislation, but we've grown to over 18,000 apprentices in the state of Wisconsin with around 3,100 sponsors in our great state, and we continue to grow. We've had record years of participation 4 years in a row now. The other item is I currently serve as board director of the great National Association of State and Territorial Apprenticeship Directors, better known as NASTAD. NASTAD is the association and representation of my fellow directors, a few of which are on this call. And we work to advocate nationally for state apprenticeship agencies and the causes around growing registered apprenticeship across the nation. NASTAD has been around as association since 1950. Again, I was not there when we became an association, but I have the pleasure of being board president currently.
Thank you. We're so excited to have all of you here to talk today about what can we learn from your experiences with other occupations that we can transition and transfer to the teaching occupation. So let's start with the foundation. Every apprenticeship foundation needs a strong mentor. So across apprenticeship occupations, journey workers are responsible for developing the next generation of professionals. What common characteristics define an effective journey worker mentor? And Joanne, I'll toss the first question to you.
So, an effective journey worker mentor combines deep trade expertise with strong teaching skills. But more importantly, they need to have patience and empathy. And they need to know how to communicate clearly, give timely feedback, model professionalism, And of course, more than anything, be supportive of apprentices' growth and while fostering a respectful, keyword, hands-on learning environment. So all those together makes for an effective journey worker.
Anyone else want to hop in on that question?
Yeah, I think in my experience, those very, very effective journey workers, again, to reiterate Joanne's point, had a certain level of empathy, but they also cared about their respective industry outside themselves. They have a strong desire to train the future of their industry, so much so that they're planting seeds that they may never pick the fruit of. They really want to invest to make sure that their industry sustains at a very, very high level. So they believe in the training that they're providing to that next generation of apprentice.
I think that's what separates your average mentor journey worker from your exemplary mentor journey worker. So, absolutely. So, what expectations, thinking about other occupations, what expectations are put on that mentor journey worker in occupations outside of teaching?
I
Meredith? Oh, go ahead, Jane.
I didn't know if you were going to call on one of us. Well, I mean, they are definitely responsible for knowing what the training outline is. Part of our role is to do compliance monitoring of our programs, and one that I was participating in, it wasn't a teacher apprenticeship. This was a different occupation. But when we were interviewing the journey worker, he said, I don't really know what he's supposed to be doing. He just kind of follows me around, and that's so the expectation is that they are familiar with the training outline and they know what they're supposed to be doing. Joanne mentioned communication. You can't over communicate enough when it comes to apprenticeship. That's one of the expectations. And the only thing I think that I would also add that kind of goes to the previous question, I had high expectations. I think the journey worker must have high expectations for the apprentice and hold them accountable. They also need to know how to motivate others. Sometimes motivating children and adults can be the same, but there are some differences. So it's important, that's an expectation that they need to come ready to be able to do that.
Absolutely. I think it's important to think about just because you're a good teacher doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make a good mentor journey worker. That there has to be that support for the adult learning principles for those individuals who are taking on that journey worker role in an apprentice setting. So thanks for bringing that to light. I would think also that mentors are selected primarily because they are strong performers, strong coaches, or both. So making sure that they have those pieces in place to be a good leader of adults is very important. And Meredith, to your point, you were talking about the training plan in the teaching profession. That would be the competencies that they would be able to understand what that apprentice teacher needs to know and be able to do to be successful in a classroom. So thanks for bringing that up. So what we're hearing is that mentoring is not accidental, it's intentional, it's structured. So in many apprenticeship occupations, journey workers also have a formal role in evaluating apprentices. So David, from your personal experiences in the trades, would you talk a little bit about how apprentices are evaluated and what can education learn from that model?
One item that I did not include in my introduction is that I had the pleasure of being an apprentice. I went through a plumbing apprenticeship back in the late 1900s. But after I completed my apprenticeship, I also had the pleasure of training other apprentices. So I've been on both sides of this coin. And one of the things that I had to do, because it was the late 1900s, is I had a book. I had an actual book that my journeyman had to sign off on, and we agreed that a weekly sign off of what I had done during that time. But aside from just like signing a book, or right now that's done electronically through many a platform. The other thing is just checking in specifically with your apprentice, right? You want to ensure that not only are they picking up on what you're doing on the job, but that they're retaining the competencies that are in that work plan. It is quite a bit to juggle when you're training an apprentice, because you have a specific job that you have to complete, while also completing and providing expansive training for another person that is not skilled yet. They're under you to become skilled, but checking in with them to ensure that you're reiterating and re-engaging the competencies that they should be learning on the job, and also building their confidence, because apprenticeship is designed to be a progressive learning model. Um, the first few months of my apprenticeship, a shovel was my best friend. I touched no pipe whatsoever the first few months of my apprenticeship. But when you juxtapose that to a teacher's apprenticeship, they should be doing minimal work with regard to executing teaching a class during those first moments in the classroom as an apprentice. They are there to learn and support, and the model is built to for them to progressively move toward a skilled teacher, to where they can then take on their own classroom upon completion. So when you compare the models, it's very similar in that progressive learning model of doing very little of the skilled work and more listening in the beginning, and then progressively skilling up to where you can take on your own classroom as you move toward journey worker.
Thank you. Any additional thoughts there?
I think that's a great point that David raised, that you don't, just because they're apprentices and somebody's looking out for them called a mentor, doesn't mean you just toss them out there. That's exactly what is happening right now when we're getting all these credentialed, degreed, certified people. That's the easiest way to lose them. And that's why retention rates in some of these occupations are very low, because you take uh, these individuals and believe that they're already knowledgeable, and that knowledge can easily be translated into skill. No, that's not the case. So in apprenticeships as well, that careful consideration for learning needs to be emphasized and also valued in that journey worker mentor apprentice relationship.
And thinking about that gradual release model in education, where the observation is taking place and then they gradually take over more responsibilities in the classroom. I know for several of our clients, we are also supporting them by creating trackers and supporting documents where a journey worker can track some of that oversight and have that accountability tool that perhaps they would not have had if they were just a new teacher mentor. So great observation. So thinking about in a typical mentor relationship with a new teacher, that mentor is not an evaluator. So that's a different role for the apprentice, the teacher apprentice journey worker. So thinking about the teaching education, how can we take that evaluative role and balance coaching and assessment and evaluation while keeping the relationship strong for those apprentices with their journey workers? Meredith, you want to take a shot at that one?
Sure. I think the same way that when they're constructing lessons for their students in their classroom and they're thinking about what will the learning look like, what does proficiency look like, they have to think about their apprentices through that same lens. They have to know what their principal's expectations are for proficiency and what that's going to look like, so that they'll know how to assess that. It's their same skill set, they're just applying it in a very different way.
And piggybacking on that question, Joanne, what would it take for teacher mentors to feel confident evaluating an apprentice and their readiness to enter the classroom?
Most definitely, teacher mentors would feel confident evaluating apprentices with clear standards. You gotta start with clear standards, clear rubrics, clear expectations, and simple observation tools or rubrics, training on giving fair but more important, actionable feedback and dedicated time. And this is kind of tricky because as it is, plates are full, but you gotta understand to give those teacher mentors that dedicated time to really observe and coach, and more importantly, reflect with and have the apprentices reflect on their own work as well. So all of those need to be supported in order for teacher mentors to feel confident.
You. So, thinking from your lens, you all lead state apprenticeship agencies. So, what role should the state apprenticeship agency play in ensuring consistency and quality in that evaluation process? And I'll toss that to you, Meredith, first.
Will you say that again and provide? I thought you were going a different direction with that one. Consistency and quality.
In the evaluation process. So, what role should the state apprenticeship agency have in that consistency and in the evaluation process?
Our office provides a virtual sponsor training where we talk about how programs can keep their apprenticeship program in compliance with our requirements and federal law. So I think, making sure that they understand like how to keep their program in compliance, how to do that documentation and that tracking in a way that aligns with what's expected of them. We also offer, through that sponsor training, we talk to our sponsors about onboarding the journey workers and what all needs to be communicated when they're onboarding journey workers. And then one more thing that we offer, and I know David's state Wisconsin, they offer something similar. We try to do quarterly a virtual mentor training where we talk about some of the things that we've talked about. And it's really cool because there will be teachers with plumbers, with social workers, with nurses, it's all with electricians, and they're all in there together talking about best practices for teaching adults, right? How do you motivate others? How do you give corrective feedback? So I think giving them that support too, those are just suggestions of things that the state apprenticeship agency can do.
Think that technical assistance, very specifically up to the point of the guideline standards that we have to regulate as state agency directors, it's very very applicable. But is to Meredith's point, one of the things that we've been doing is trying to pull together those groups of mentors and also those groups of apprentices because we get great feedback when we have those groups of apprentices together in what we could use or what their journey workers can use to help motivate them in that learning processing and keeping them engaged. So it's very, very two-pronged, but we as state directors try to give all of the technical assistance tools that we can, even if that technical assistance is a reference to one of our very, very outstanding sponsors that do a wonderful job in bringing them together so that they can learn from each other. Even if it's that, our role is to provide that very specific technical assistance. The last thing that we want to do is come in to come down on a program. We provide all of the technical assistance that we absolutely can for a sponsor to be successful.
Also, to both David's and Meredith's point, the partnerships. As a state apprenticeship agency, we partner very closely with, for our purposes today, our state apprenticeship office has partnered strongly with our Department of Education. That way, any changes, as we know, everything evolves much quicker these days, don't you think? But to be able to adapt to those changes and still maintain consistency and quality. So those partnerships with your Department of Education or in other industries, the subject matter experts, the industry SMEs itself, those are crucial to us state apprenticeship agencies in terms of partnerships, and thus being able to ensure consistency and quality.
Thank you. Yes. So, what systems or policies from other apprenticeships could realistically translate into teacher mentor training, teacher mentor journey worker training? Meredith, I'll start with you.
Um, I think, one of the things I was thinking about is the importance of everyone in the food chain understanding the expectations. I was, across industries, sometimes the leadership is bought in, but the information has not been communicated to the journey workers. And so I think just making sure that everyone has the same information about the expectations and is on the same page. I think that's what's most critically important.
I agree with that. We just concluded some focus groups for a client, and that is one of the key pieces of information that we heard over and over again was that there were communication gaps between the top and the bottom, that they were not getting that communication. So that's excellent. Any other thoughts there on what systems or policies from other trade or manufacturing apprenticeships could be translated realistically into teacher mentor training?
I think that the teacher apprenticeship model could really take a lot from the joint apprenticeship committee model from other apprenticeship trades. And I say that because that model brings together multiple employers that are training apprentices to kind of coalesce around the specific cause of training an apprentice within their occupation. Uh, and from what I've been able to learn, especially in our state's execution, is that unfortunately the schools, because they're disparate around our state, are kind of working in silos in training their apprentices, and they're not talking to other school districts that are also training apprentices because they would have the opportunity to solve a problem that both of them may be going through and being new to training apprentices, but they don't know that both of them are having that same problem. The JACs coalesce around that really well because they're having these monthly meetings, even meetings every 2 weeks, to engage with each other to say, hey, let's come together and solve this training problem. So I think teacher apprenticeship can pull a lot from the joint apprenticeship committee model.
Yes, yeah, and I would think that that would be a community of practice or a problem of practice session in education speak. So yes, that's a great idea. And if a state education agency is the sponsor, then they would have the capacity to be that entity that brings together those employers to discuss problems of practice. So great. Anything else to add there, Joanne?
Yeah. So I was glad that David said that because that's exactly what we wanted to achieve. We don't want different silos. I've been known to say that silos are for corn, not for apprenticeship. And therefore, and that is why we had partnered with our Arizona Department of Education to be the sponsor for the program. That way, all these different rural areas, urban areas, different school districts can come together and pretty much realize that we have the same problem. Let's go and coalesce together, and come up with solutions. And it also maintains consistency and quality of the program.
Yes, always going back to that. So, thinking about the critical need to have strong mentor journey workers, guiding an individual who's going to be teaching our children, we know that it's important. Um, so, let's imagine that we're building a mentor model from scratch. So, if you were designing the ideal teacher journey worker model, what elements would you include? And David, I'll toss that to you first.
I think building a very specific relationship would be first and foremost. What specific competencies for that journey worker does it take to build that relationship? And this is something for teachers that they can pull from building those relationships with students, because I know for fact the teachers that I remember growing up are the ones that built a very specific relationship that I carried with me for the rest of my life. So as a journey worker, you want to first build a relationship and a certain level of respect with your apprentice because you quickly learn the best model for that apprentice to succeed, right? You may have an apprentice that really works well with you by your side. So you want to carry that apprentice with you and slowly kind of push them out to try a few things on their own. Where, to counter that, you may have an apprentice that's really a go-getter. You just need to show them a couple of things or give them a really quick how to do, and you can send them off maybe 10 feet away from you to try out that thing. You're still in the capture of their eye, where you can quickly go over to correct in real time. And that's what I see as a benefit for teachers, that ability to start at that very beginning with an unskilled teacher, but maybe, send them off to the corner with four students to go through a lesson with them while you watch, while also teaching the rest of the group to see if you've really honed in on the execution of a certain skill set that you're trying to hand down to your teacher apprentice. It's great practice in a very controlled atmosphere that then you can slowly let them expand upon. And that's something that journey workers in the teaching profession can pull from journey workers in other professions. It's just that progressive learning model. So building that relationship first so that you can learn how far this apprentice can go and where you progressively lead them in building their skill set as a teacher.
Outstanding. So relationships are where you start. Meredith, let's build on that. What would your ideal teacher journey worker apprenticeship model look like?
I was thinking a lot along the lines of what David was saying. I'm a former teacher and instructional coach too, and you mentioned that gradual release of responsibility, and that's where David was going too. And I remember one of our mentor teachers, showed us that graph and talked about the bulk of the learning takes place in that guided practice. And I think sometimes it's easy to remember that when we're dealing with children, but then when we're dealing with adults, we can jump to, I'm going to tell you how to do it, now go do it, instead of remembering like that's where all the learning happens is when we're side by side, or like you said, David, you're over in the corner with four people, but I'm still listening to what you're doing and giving lots of feedback. Joanne mentioned reflection, just all of those things. And the only other thing, one thing I learned as an instructional coach when we were co-teaching, so this would be for your journey workers, making that feedback student centered. I noticed when you did this, the student did that. It somehow, makes it feel less, almost a critique of them if you can keep things student focused. And so those were just two things that came to mind for me.
All right, and Meredith, Joanne, you mentioned making that actionable feedback. So that's a great connection. Any additions that you would add for your ideal journey worker apprenticeship model?
So I think being teachers, that's already ideal because you have that technical expertise. However, we got to switch from a teacher hat to a mentor hat. What do I mean by that? Teachers are great. Well, at least we'd like to think all of them are, that they are successful in converting concepts, converting knowledge into ways that their students can understand and be able to grasp, right? When you're a mentor, it's not just about getting it, it's about being able to translate it to be able to do it. And so it is now not about just ensuring absorption of knowledge, but ensuring competency. And you cannot achieve that without one, giving these individuals opportunity to apply what they've learned, but also being able to give immediate actionable feedback. And so for teachers to be, adopt the journey worker model, they would need to step back a little bit from teaching a student, but actually into a role of someone who's mentoring what Meredith has mentioned before, a coworker and somebody with a genuine passion for what the industry will be like in a few more years, then that all together would make up for the right mentor psyche, or you know what I mean. St. Patrick's Day.
So let's build on that a little bit. I love the theme that we have today is what can we learn from other occupations that we can use to strengthen the journey worker in the teacher apprenticeship model. So let's think about if teachers fully embraced the journey worker model in other occupations. So think of other occupations that you lead: plumbing, welding, electrician, manufacturing. Think about what responsibilities would the mentors have, what authority would they hold, what training would they receive, and what incentive or compensation would exist. So try to pull that back again and think about if I'm thinking about an electrician or a plumber, what can I pull from that journey worker apprenticeship model that I can insert into a teacher journey worker model? Joanne, I'll start with you on this one.
So from other industries, especially with us in Arizona, who have had programs for decades now, it's almost automatic that when a person goes through an apprenticeship, the learning they got, even the way they were trained, they take with them to pass on to the next generation. That is something that has organically happened, and we can't veer away from that anymore. It just is. So with a teacher apprenticeship being very young, we hope that that would be a cycle that they will learn eventually. But to take from the other industries, teacher mentors would need to learn how to break tasks into steps so that learners practice gradually, and the constant repetitive and the complemented by feedback, actionable feedback and reflection, I think would be able to make these teacher mentors successful.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because a teacher is gradually teaching a student to be able to do a thing or execute a thing, most usually on paper or a computer, unless it's a shop class or STEM class or something like that, right? But the as a journey worker, the mentor teacher is you're teaching a doer. You're teaching someone to build a skill to actually do a thing. And in this particular instance, doing the thing is passing down a lesson so that a student will be able to do a thing, whether it's in this classroom or years from now. So you really have to think in those standards. When I was in my apprenticeship, my journey worker was just teaching me to do a thing. You're teaching someone to do a thing so that they can teach someone else to do a thing immediately. The assessment is the execution of teaching someone to do a thing. And that's very, very different with regard to teacher apprenticeship versus other apprenticeships. But the skill set taken from other apprenticeships, as far as again building that specific relationship, uh, uh, fervently assessing when you can let that individual go a bit off on their own. If I can only let this person go 2 feet away from me, the following year it's 5 feet. The following year it's 10 feet. They can handle that without me jumping in. It's learning that slow progression and allowing that individual to get it. And I think, building off previous part of our conversation, one of the greatest joys of a journey worker in training an apprentice is when that apprentice gets it. When
Yes.
you're able to see them actually get it, whether it's that assessment or just walking over or just looking over from a distance, and they're executing something that you have been slowly teaching them, and you see that progress. that not only builds confidence in the apprentice, it builds confidence in the journey worker that you're passing on your knowledge in the right way for this individual apprentice. That's one of the joys of the journey worker. And I think that particular portion of the assessment is something that teacher journey workers can take from other industries. It's slowly allowing that individual to create practice in that controlled environment, watching to see where they're getting it, and then assessing where they don't and redirecting when they don't in real time. It's such a great teacher. When I talk to high schoolers, I always ask about, what do you know what type learner you are? I know for fact now at my big age that I'm a tactile learner. I can read a thing, but I need to do a thing, and I need to be able to screw it up a little bit so that I can fix the thing. I know that about myself. So apprenticeship works great for a learner like myself, right? The hope is that when we're vetting those that get apprenticeship opportunities, that they are the same way. These are the people that learn from doing. And it's no different in the teacher apprenticeship. When we built out our teacher apprenticeship, when we were pulling knowledge from those in the practice, every last one of them said that the best part of their of them progressing toward licensure was their student teaching experience. Every last one of them said the exact same thing. So our goal in our build was to flip their model that they know and love on its head. You're going to have a student teaching experience since that's the part that you love so much for the next 3.5 years. It's gonna be a full-blown student teaching experience, and you're gonna get your bachelor's degree while you go through that experience. So when we talk about that mentor model, it has to be just that, progressively taking someone through this hands-on experience and allowing them to progress just like other trades have done, some of which over 100 years, allowing that apprentice to slowly progress toward a skilled individual.
And I think what you're saying right now just elevates the critical need to have a strong mentor to lead that individual through that process, that it's critical to the success of that apprentice. So thank you for that. So let's take a moment and shift our lens just a bit. What is the biggest shift that education systems need to make to adopt the apprenticeship model? And Joanne, Meredith, I'll toss it to either one of you to start this one.
I'll start us off. I think it's really important. There is a mindset shift that apprenticeship is an employer-driven model. The universities are used to making placements and making decisions and things like that with just their traditional students. In an apprenticeship, they are employee first, continuing to go to school. It is not a student coming out for clinical experience or an internship, employee first.
Absolutely. Joanne, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I actually just want to emphasize that point because it seems to be that apprentices are not students. They happen to be employees who are trying to really be great at their jobs and using an educational component to add to the learning that they already are doing at the work site. And so if education has its, schedules, structure, and all that, we have to understand that these individuals are working full time. And therefore, if we could implore to the educational institutions to be more flexible in terms of being able to deliver that education or that related instruction, which supplements their learning at work, that would be golden. And also in the mindset of the employers, which is the school districts, the charters, whatever, we need to remember, yes, we are teachers, but these people are, again, not students. They are our coworkers that we are supporting and we are growing to be the best assets to our organizations. So that simple mindset, that switch that we are not just teaching, but we are mentoring.
Yes. I heard someone say who was a teacher journey worker apprentice recently that she saw her role as preparing a coworker to work in the classroom right beside her. And I thought that is a great mindset shift. Any additions there, David, from you about what shifts you think the education system needs to make to embrace the teacher apprenticeship model?
I agree with my fellow panelists. I think being more pliable in the execution in balancing the two. These are full-time employees that are coming, through higher ed. So I think being more pliable in the execution and fully understanding how the classroom is part of the model holistically, and not two standalone components.
Absolutely. So, as states are building out their programs, most of the states we work with are in the early phases of building out teacher registered apprenticeship. But as they're building out their programs, what should the state prioritize when they're building that mentor journey worker structure in their states?
I think if
Start.
there's any baseline guidance that they have, any mentor guidance materials that they can pass on or build out, that works really, really well. I learned in our construction that for the educator occupation specifically, having a document to back up what you explain is very, very much needed, and that's a bit of a pivot from other occupations. Other occupations, you can kind of explain what you expect, and they go out and execute. But having a document to back up best practices, FAQs around your specific state model, is very, very helpful. And then I'll go back to where we started this webinar. I think one of Meredith's answers, there's nothing wrong with over communication. Absolutely nothing wrong with over communication, especially when we're talking about an apprenticeable occupation that is so very, very young, like teacher apprenticeship is. Over communicating with your stakeholders is certainly a best practice.
Something that
Absolutely.
I think would be helpful in oh, sorry, Carla, go ahead.
No, no, I was just passing on to you.
Okay, all right. In the development that would help the journey worker, the way we built ours, the competencies are aligned to how our teachers are assessed. It's called the ATOT, the Alabama Teaching Maybe Observation Tool. So it's the same thing that a first year teacher or a 10th year teacher is being, um, you know, held to the same standard, the same categories. That's how they're being evaluated by their superiors. That's what they're teaching their apprentices. And so it just lines right up with preparing them for their first year on the job. I think to me, that kind of sounds like a no-brainer, but sometimes we build training plans that don't connect to what they're going to be doing next. So keeping that in mind. And I'm going to go off camera for just a second because I need to plug my battery in. Okay.
Anything additional there, Joanne?
Yeah, just to follow Meredith, it's really so simple. It's hard sometimes, if you've ever heard that. But really, with us, we had our Department of Education design it very well. It's almost like, hey, if you were a queen for a day, what would you want? Yeah, an apprenticeship to, how do you want to train these people? But I think what also needs to come across is you don't have to make it perfect the first time. We are all in this journey as apprentices as well, and we are also learning and being, have that room to pivot and make changes, have a 2.0, a 3.0 eventually, but it does not need to be perfect, just doable and actionable. And so we encourage those others that are probably looking into going into apprenticeships, but scared because of all the compliance that needs to happen. You want to make sure it's successful. Its success is going to come from being able to try it first. It does not have to be perfect. And that's what we're here for. The state apprenticeship agencies, we're here as your partners.
It's a great
Yes.
point, Joanne. We all have specific structures. If we need to pivot a certain competency, whatever that may be in our build of our models, we can certainly do that. All of us have the structure to pivot our models very quickly to ensure that we're serving the sponsors in our state very specifically, the same way that we would do any other occupation. That's a great point. It does not have to be perfect the first tryout.
Mm, right. And piggybacking on what both of you, all three of you have said really, but thinking about that over communication piece, I see that in live time over and over again. And then making that alignment. I know in my home state, we aligned our clinical residency evaluation with our teacher evaluation, and then we aligned our apprenticeship evaluation with our teacher evaluation. So there's that seamless transition. They're an apprentice, they're being evaluated, they become a full-time teacher, they step into the classroom, and they already have a good understanding of what that evaluation looks like. So great advice. We have a closing question here in just a moment, but I thought we might jump to the questions and answers and see, we have about 9 minutes so we could answer anything that's in the Q&A. My I'll just read. My husband is a journey worker and has apprentices often. He received no training to be a mentor. Do you have journey worker training beyond the skill itself? So when you're
Yes,
thinking about the trades, go ahead, Meredith.
the one that we offer quarterly that's open to any of our programs here in Alabama, that's what it's about. It's about how to give corrective feedback, how to communicate across generations. That's huge.
Huge.
How to motivate others, things like that. Learning styles, like David mentioned. Yes, and I do think that is critically important. We contract that out actually. So if your state is interested, just hit me up. I'll be glad to share our person's contact information.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I really appreciate the point about communication, Meredith. What type of communication have you found to be most helpful for onboarding all members of a team at the beginning of an apprenticeship year? For example, the school leader, the teacher, mentor, and apprentice. Of course, anyone can answer as well.
We have the university does an onboarding to communicate, like, as the sponsor and as your related instruction provider, here are our expectations. But then they also tell the employer, here's what we expect. So here's what we expect you to cover when you onboard your journey workers. Like David said, I mean, you just don't assume anybody knows anything. And there's got to be a clear plan, the roles and responsibilities, who's communicating what.
And just to add to that too, the way our state apprenticeship programs go, there's a set of standards that every program sponsor signs and pretty much designs and commits to. And that set of standards is shared with your employer partners and even with the apprentices, because essentially you're all agreeing to doing the same thing. And so there's transparency when it comes to those things as well. So by being transparent, you also are able to ensure that consistency.
Okay, the next question. A question about apprentices who are struggling, expectations versus progress. Does mentoring change when apprentices are not making either the expected amount of progress or the expected rate of progress?
Um, you may change your mentoring style. You may change your particular mentor practice, but the mentoring itself does not change. There is, of course, culpability on the apprentice to work in a way to pick up on the skill set. That is across the board. That is across the board for every apprenticeable occupation. It was the same for me when I was a young plumbing apprentice. But there also is a specific culpability in that mentor to provide that learning. If a mentor teacher would certainly pivot how they're teaching a student if that student isn't quite understanding the algebra problem. It would be the same job of that mentor teacher to pivot the style that they're teaching their apprentice if that apprentice is not progressing in the manner that they expect. So I would err on the side of caution and say, hey, why don't I pivot the way that I'm introducing this training to my apprentice before I would exude all culpability on the apprentice themselves, because it just may be a mismatch in styles, and it's much easier to pivot the mentoring style than it is to pivot the apprentice's learning style.
Anything additional there?
Well said, David.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay, one last question. Considering the significant list of skills mentors need in order to do the job well, what number of hours of professional learning do you see as ideal, realistic, since these mentor journey workers are also full-time employees?
It's ever changing. But yeah, it's ever changing. I would say certainly go through some training that first year, but if there are any CEUs, I know teachers have to get a certain level of CEUs to maintain their licenses. In other states, Wisconsin is certainly one of them. Try to get in some mentoring classes in your as your CEUs. I wouldn't prescribe a baseline of hours for mentoring, because there are those of us that are just naturally great mentors and absolutely get it. And those of us that need, an 8 hour course on mentoring to actually get it. So I wouldn't specifically prescribe that. I would rather prescribe the selection of a mentor with a rubric before I prescribe a coursework on mentoring.
And even like maybe instead of, of course, some formal professional development in the beginning, but we encourage our sponsors to check in on your apprentices, which actually you're required to check in on your apprentices, but check in on the journey workers too. Maybe once in 9 weeks, check in with them, ask them what's working, what's not, get feedback from them. Just make sure there's not anything else they need. Maybe, it doesn't need to be formal professional development, but just be there for them to support them.
And you're on mute, Joanne.
The focus is not just on the apprentice. Remember, it's a whole um, concerted effort by the employer. It's employer driven. And so as employers, we're not just checking in our apprentices, but we also need to check on the effectivity of our mentors. If our mentors are also supported and they're not overwhelmed, it's all about relationship, people. It's just all about relationship.
Yeah,
Yes.
if I can leave with one thing, and this is one we require a transition to trainer course for every apprentice in the state of Wisconsin as they complete their apprenticeship. It's required of every single apprentice across the state. It's an 8 hour course. I always tell apprentices at their graduation ceremonies, when I have the honor of speaking to them, be the mentor that you always wanted. If I can prescribe a course or a baseline training or just a saying to keep in the back of your mind, even if you never went through the apprenticeship model, be the mentor that you always wanted in your internship. Be the mentor that you always wanted in your student teaching time for your curriculum. That'll help guide you as to how you should mentor your apprentice.
What a great last word, David. Thank you. I think our key takeaways today are that mentor quality determines apprenticeship quality. Other
Mm.
industries treat mentor preparation as essential infrastructure, and we have to do the same in the teaching profession. And that teacher apprenticeships can strengthen mentor systems by learning from these established models. Can't thank you enough on behalf of the National Center for Grow Your Own for spending your time with us and just sharing your expertise with our guests. This webinar will be posted on our website for others to learn from it. And we thank all of the participants for joining us today. Thank you for giving us your time. And we wish you a happy St. Patrick's Day. We all got the memo except for David.
I bet his pants are green.
Okay. Thank you all so much. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.